The following program is a Town of Colonie television production of the William K. Sanford Town Library.
Well, welcome to Artist Corner. My name is Joe Nash. Today we're going to be talking to Marion Leap, who lives over in Niskayuna. She recently had a show here during the month of February. You may have seen it. And she taught for over 30 years in both Coxsackie and the Albany City School District, mainly in K through 6 as an art teacher, but she does her own work. You may have seen it during February. So welcome, Marion.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So, I have a lot of questions here. I liked your art. We're going to talk about some of it, but why don't we just start at the very beginning? You went to St. Rose. How did you decide to go the route of not being an artist for a living, but an art teacher?
Well, I was fortunate because when I was in high school, by sophomore year, my art teacher recognized I had some skill, and I also enjoyed doing it. So my art teachers encouraged me to keep taking advanced art. So I was in the advanced art program at Niskayuna High School.
Okay.
And then from Niskayuna, by the time I was a senior, or probably junior when you're trying to decide what your career will be, what I did was my teacher actually said to me, you'd make a really good art teacher. And I'm thinking, I think I would like that. So I then had the opportunity to go to an open house at St. Rose. And I had the good fortune of meeting Corinne Fall, who since now has passed, but she was phenomenal. And when I met her, it was like everything clicked.
Well, St. Rose has been known through the years for their art department, right?
Right. They had a really excellent art education program. Yeah. Currently, I don't know if it's the same. I know they still have an art program, but it might be more graphic arts. But I know when I went to school, that was a really strong program. And I remember when I graduated, even when I first went to Coxsackie, Athens, when I was going through the interview process, they were like, well, St. Rose, we always like their candidates, which I didn't know, one way or the other why, but we were given a good background.
Were you in that building there that's down on State Street?
We were down on State Street, yep.
It was always separate from the rest of the campus.
It was, and it was, when I first went there, I thought it would be odd, but it wasn't. You got used to it, and it was like your own little haven. It was like your own place you went for all your studios.
Okay. So how did you then decide to concentrate on K through 6, which I think would be, before we started, you were telling me you like chaos.
I really like the little kids. They never tire me. I mean, they're excited, and every time you introduce anything, they're so thrilled about it. And that's what I love. It's like, even though red and white make pink, when you teach a little one, they're so enthusiastic, you can't help but be enthusiastic back.
They're not jaded by life yet.
And nothing is, they're not afraid of failure. I think that's what I like the best, because when I worked with older students, even you had asked earlier if I ever worked with some older adults. I've taught a few times, and it's not that I don't like it, but I don't like it as much. I think that's a better way to put it, because there's too many rules and regulations I think adults make that you're going to make a mistake. You ask a little child, they don't care. It's like, sure, let's do it.
So what kind of, I guess the right word is, mediums. Is that the right word?
Yes.
What mediums do you, before we talk about a few, you work mainly in watercolor and
mixed media.
Mixed media. And what's that? I can't, is it
gouache?
Gouache. I'm sorry, I keep saying. So you're mainly watercolor, gouache, and
pen and ink,
Pen and ink. The pen and ink ones that were at the library were very nice, but how did you
get there?
Do you work in many different mediums?
Well, I kind of came through the back door being a painter. I went to school.
So you started painting?
No, I started with drawing. When I went to school, my portfolio was very strong in drawing, because from Niskayuna, I did a lot of drawing with charcoal, pen and ink, stippling, all the line groupings. I did all of that. Then when I went to St. Rose, to be a teacher, you need to have a pretty good curriculum as far as knowing the elements and principles to be able to teach it. And I had to take painting, I had to take sculpture, I had to take silkscreen. And when I took silkscreen, I realized that it was an excellent opportunity to learn about color. And to me, that was brand new, because I didn't know about color in high school. I learned color in college. And then when I went for graduate school, I had to seek SUNY to get some of my courses, because back when I was going for art education, it wasn't totally defined. So St. Rose only had so many courses, and then you had to go over to SUNY.
So when did the abstract period start with you?
Well, for me, I see everything as lines, shapes. So it's not that it's abstract, it's just the way I see things.
Yeah.
But what I like to do is I'm in awe of realism, but I want to put my own spin on it. I want to put my own personal touch. So that's where the abstract comes.
Okay, so why don't we talk about this one then?
Okay.
You can maybe explain that. You'll see this. It'll be on the screen while we're talking,
Okay. Well, this is basically a very soft watercolor. Then after I did the watercolor, I went back with watercolor gouache.
Yeah.
But the way I use watercolor gouache is with white paint or white gouache, so it's opaque, meaning you can't see through it completely. And it's like layer upon layer upon layer. So as you're building it, you get like a dimensional quality. But I loved line. That's where my drawing comes in. So whenever I'm painting, I don't paint like it's a paintbrush. I paint like it's a different size pencil.
So is that, one question I want to ask you as I was looking at all your art, is that all planned out, or do you just sort of go with the flow, or does it kind of...
It's more go with the flow. I have an idea. My process is when I'm thinking about doing something before I actually start doing it, I sort of get ideas. I gather information. Like I might look some things up and think, I kind of like that.
Because you were telling me before we started, you like the process.
Right.
Is that like more than the product, or is it?
It's about equal. By the time I'm done, I'm hopeful that I'll be proud of the product. But the process is what I really enjoy, because it's like a place that I go that's just mine.
But you didn't have this all planned out?
No.
This would go this way, this would go that way?
No. It's sort of like I'll sit down, I'll do some, then I'll go away, then I'll come back and sit down and do it again. I don't do it in one setting. I work in the evening.
Yeah.
So I usually work after it gets dark. Like I might start at 10 and work till like 12, 1 o'clock during the week. But I like doing it when nothing else bothers me. But during the day, I might be going outside and looking at the trees. I might be comparing colors. I might be looking up, different palettes to use. So I kind of do my research before, but I don't put it all together. And my reasoning is I don't want it to be a formula, because if I plan it too much, I tend to get too tight.
Okay. So I don't want to get all metaphysical on you.
Okay.
But I mean, many songwriters will say, well, this song just wrote itself. Many authors will say, well, the characters took over, or the book, parts of it wrote itself. Do you have any affinity with that? Do you know what they're talking about when they say that?
Yeah, I sort of get it, because when I'm working, it's usually I try to do a 2 to 3 hour slot, and the first hour is really just getting into the zone. Then you get right into the meat, and then you got to wind down. You can't just stop. You have to. So I think that's what they're speaking of. It's like a place you get where you know what you're going to do, but you don't know what you're going to do. You just know when you're there.
And that, it would seem to me, would mainly apply to the abstract stuff, right?
To the abstract, and also what you're trying to communicate, because sometimes, like when I'm doing it, it's also a process that I'm processing in my mind. Like when I'm doing this, it's also helping me become clearer about my objectives in my life personally, as well as on the sheet of paper.
Okay. Well, the one behind you is, I guess you could say it's called Big RPI Fan. Is that the right name?
It's just RPI Fan.
RPI Fan. You can see the hockey stuff, but it's not really abstract. It's not really realistic.
This is a good example of how, when I went to college, I was required to take courses in almost every studio. You have to take so many credits. I took silkscreen with green, and green was where I learned about color. But this is the reason it has the flat planes, is because when you're silkscreening, everything is a layer you put through a screen. So you keep blocking out. And the reason this is more you can read, I had been asked to do a show up at RPI. I had a friend who knew a friend. So we had a show up there, and one of the things they suggested is, could I do a still life with the hockey equipment? So she was able to get the hockey equipment for me, and when she got the hockey equipment, once I get it, that's a case where I get to know it, because I don't do hockey. I don't know hockey equipment.
But it's not really, it's sort of...
It's abstract to it, but not so much that you can't. If you actually saw the equipment, like where the labels and things are, those are all accurate, but the way I put it together, not that it's in any different form, but maybe the way I block out the white or I block out the red, that's a little different. But my patterning, that's all mine. And the same with the hockey stick. That's all mine.
Yeah.
But this part here is actually pretty realistic, just a little flatter than some people.
So that, something like that would be planned out more than just letting your...
Right. Well, that was sort of like an assignment.
Yeah.
This here is like when I first graduated from school with my graduate degree, I wanted to keep working because I always felt that I was a stronger teacher if I was also still an artist, because I wanted to keep understanding the process that you do every day. So what I would do is I'd emphasize in the summer doing my work. So in the evenings, I'd work on that. During the fall, not so much because I was pretty tied up with school. Mm-hmm. But with doing so, it made me stronger because when we were doing it in school, the kids and I totally related to how to come up from A to B to get to your final product.
So that was 25 years ago.
Yeah, this was about 25 years ago.
And this one that we talked about earlier. Right,
that might have been maybe only, I don't know, 10 years ago. And then I have some mixed medias around here, too.
So would you... How would you say your, now that you're retired, has your, is style the right word? How has your style changed, or how?
I think each style is kind of reflective of where I'm at.
Because you said in your artist statement that came with your show, each stage reflects, what you're interested in at the time. So
right. Well, when I did the still lifes, when I start to feel like I'm almost into a formula, like I'm doing a still life, I know what I'm going to do. It's very predictable. When it gets too predictable, I know it's time for me to channel myself. Abstract for me is harder because it doesn't have anything solid that you're sure the viewer is going to like. You might make something, and some people really like abstract work. Some people don't care for it. I'm more of a realist, even though my work isn't totally realistic.
Well, the ones you had downstairs that I was looking at, the abstracts, they're very colorful and bold, very intricate.
Right.
Now, has that always been your style, or is that?
Yes, I'm intrigued with how things work together, and I'm intrigued with how you can build upon one thing to the next, and that's where the styles come in, because when I did this, even though I may go to something like that, they're connected, because from here, it was more like channeling in. I wanted to zero in more on the design and less on the subject, so then I'd go to this. Okay. Also, I wanted to see what happens. I'm always experimenting. What happens if I do this to this? Okay. Is it going to succeed? Once I finished school, there was a freedom. I wasn't afraid of making a mistake because I basically did this for the process for myself. At the end, I came up with a nice product.
So would an abstract go through many phases, or do you start, throw it away, start up, like crumble it up? And do they...
Most of my work, when I'm done, I like it, but if I don't like it, I'm not afraid to tear it up and try it with something else. I actually have a piece that's not in the current show that I took 3 paintings and just chopped them up and put them together. Okay. But that's the whole thing, the freedom of not being afraid to make a mistake. Okay. That's what I want to work for.
So when you were doing your artwork and also teaching, did teaching the youngsters, the kids, K through 6, did that somehow affect or inspire you in your own work? Or?
I would say it inspired me. I love the energy.
Yeah.
But I think in a lot of ways, even though I may be older, I'm still a child at heart. Okay. and I love to play. I mean, it's not playing like I'm not serious about my work, but it's the freedom to make a mistake. I think sometimes when we get older, we're so worried about what other people think, and will they like it or won't they like it. That was one of the things that I had to learn. It was okay if it wasn't perfect. Yeah. It was okay if I made a mistake. And that's something you have to be able to do yourself. People can tell you to do it, but to really believe it, that's a whole different thing.
So is art, we're always reading in the news about arts in the schools and everything, all arts, but is art neglected by our educational, maybe not neglected, it's too strong, but is it just sort of something fun to do for this period, or should it be taken more serious, or did you try to make it?
Yeah, for me, I see art as the icing on the cake. You need the fundamentals because you need a solid background, but you also need to be able to promote it, and the way to promote it is your packaging. And if you can put it all together, it can't help but be stronger. So I think we support one another. Do I think it's neglected? Like you said, that's a strong word, but I think it depends where you are. I've worked where everybody worked collaboratively, and the special areas worked collaboratively with the classroom teachers. I've also worked where everything was very isolated. It depends on where you are. I think for it to be the most effective, you need to work together, and you need to respect each other together.
Well, I was going to say, one of my questions I had written down here was, is art seen as not as important as like math or science, but of course, there's tons of math and science in art, isn't
Yeah,
there?
there is. Well, that's sort of why I like the pieces, because for me, a lot of people will look at my work and say, too, not necessarily the pieces we have here today, that they have a quilt quality. Well, that's really reflected. Every year we used to do the Black History Month, and we do the quilts and what they were symbolic of, and the kids loved it. But that also, by doing all that research for the kids' lessons,
you're learning.
I'm learning, and it's influencing me just like it's influencing them.
Okay, so why don't we talk about a more current work here?
Okay.
Because now you're working in this would be mixed media, right?
Right.
This is some of your pencil, and it has ribbons around the ribbons. But people will see this on the screen. I know that it's glaring right now, but they'll see it on the screen. But so you got the intricacies of. This is pencil ink?
It's the watercolor gouache, but I go back and I use some pen and ink as well.
This is all different kinds of ribbons, all very colorful.
Right.
So how did this phase of your career?
Well, I get into like these ideas, but I also wanted to recycle everything. So I wanted to recycle, and someone had given us ribbon. So I used ribbon, and I'm like, this is really fun, but I wanted to see if I could make the two things mixed together. It's, again, I went from here to here. I went a little more with realism, because this is like done not that long ago. I did a whole series for a full year, the first year I retired, on just beautiful flowers, but I did it sort of in...
well, it's not really abstract, but it's it's very intricate, all different colors. I mean...
Well, it's the layer. I do several layers on each piece.
Meaning,
I'll put a color down, then I'll put another color on top. But that's the silkscreen background, because you learn what happens when you put another color on top. So I have a lot of practice from that. So when I use
you mean that you're actually painting over?
Yes.
Also, you're making a new color. Okay.
Right.
I thought you meant you just do all the blue first, and all the...
Well, you do all the blue, but then you put another color on top of it. It's like putting one scarf on top of
another. Then how do you decide... Should you put another color over that one or that one? I mean, how do you do that?
I sort of can see it. Like I can see things in values.
Yeah.
Like I can literally squint my eyes and kind of tell what value that might be. And that's just practice.
Yeah.
But I've also had the opportunity to keep practicing the basics, because I'm teaching it all the time. Okay. So it's kind of like you can't get rusty.
So what do you think of now? I don't know what the schools are doing now, but I don't know if you're still in touch with the schools. A lot of the artwork now is like all on computer. How is that affecting things?
Well, I have young children. Well, I don't have young children. I have children that are old enough to really appreciate that. Like my one son's 25, my other son's 22, and my daughter's 18. So I see how it's changed in the education program. First, I was a little bit scared, I'll be honest. But then I realized that you can't be afraid of it. It's just the reality.
It's like when the internet came to the library, we're all freaking out.
Right. So I've learned to respect it, but I'm not. For myself, I still like the hands-on approach. I can respect it. I'm amazed at what they can do, and my children have shown me what they can do. I'm not opposed to it. I think it's just something that's part of our culture now.
Does the computer, what's the term? Does it do more of the work than maybe you would have done with combining colors, or does it still? You still got to know how to.
You still have to know how. It's a different tool. I think you're still creating art, but you're using a different tool, and it's just a different tool that our children started using a computer a lot earlier. Like I didn't use a computer till I was in the high school, and I'm not sure that people that are even older than myself even use a computer. Like my mom's still alive; she doesn't use a computer. But I think you can't be afraid of it because it's a reality. But I think it's just a different way to create art. I'm not opposed to it. If I were still in the school district and I was still teaching, I would definitely have to be more involved with using it, because that's just what they use. Okay. I personally like the studio, and I still like do classes with just studio material. We don't have a computer or things like that. Not that we are opposed to it, just it's not.
But the schools still do it the old way, some.
Right. I think there's more and more being brought into the classroom as the funding comes in.
Okay. So one thing that's interested me, I was reading your little biography, you taught both in Coxsackie and the Albany City. Is there a difference between sort of the urban and rural
well, I learned a little
outlook on art, I guess?
Well, I don't know if there's a difference. I learned a little from each group. I'm glad I started in Coxsackie, Athens, because I came straight out of college, went right into a teaching position. So they were a good place to begin because it wasn't as, I think in the urban school I had to move faster.
Yeah.
Even the schedule was much tougher. Everything was a little more challenging for me, but I think the support from my students was equal in both.
Yeah.
I was very lucky because my students understood that this wasn't about me, it was about us, and we kind of could establish that right at the beginning.
Okay. So one thing I want to ask you about, as I was walking around looking at your show, your titles. I'll just read some of the titles, and then because I want to ask you sort of, you got simplicity, determination, perpetuity. There's one called Collaboration 1. It's a series of 4.
Right.
So Collaboration 1, Collaboration 2, 3, 4. Do the titles come first or after, or
They come
during
after.
the process?
They come after. The collaboration of the 4 was we were working as a group, and I'm always believed that you work better if you work together as opposed to work against each other, and that's hard for some people.
When you did those 4, you were working with other people?
Well, no, I was doing something as a group with, like, we have a small group of artists that are local that work together,
Oh, okay.
but we work in collaboration to support one another, to
I see what
keep
you're saying.
support in emotionally, I would say, more than financially. But that was part of the little play on words, because as a group, we were so interesting because each of us brought something to the table.
Yeah.
But when I did that piece, I started with 1 and I liked it, but then when I did 2, I liked it better. Then when I did 3, I liked it even more. And then when I did the 4th, I liked it all together. So that's where the collaboration came.
Okay, so,
with simplicity.
Simplicity was the one we saw first. Yeah.
Yeah, with simplicity, it's all the primary colors. But that's why I did, because it's just very
I didn't
simple.
catch that.
Yeah, it's just your basic colors.
And then this one,
That's destiny.
Destiny. How did you come up
Well,
with?
because I'm destined to make it beautiful by the time I'm done.
Okay.
So that's where I was getting, but I started out with a very neutral palette. Like you can see, like the beiges and the whites, and then I gradually built on it and built on it.
Okay.
And then the destiny is like the outside cage, but destined to still work it out.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, it's just when I'm done, I learn. I look at it and I come up with a name. It's like naming your child,
Okay.
sort of in a way.
Well, RPI fan speaks for itself.
Right, yeah.
So now where are some of the places people can see your artwork? You just told me you're over at the restaurant and...
Right. Well, periodically, I get an opportunity to show. Right now, I have some more work up at Tesro's restaurant on Union Street in Schenectady.
Okay.
And then periodically, when there's shows, I'll apply and hopefully get accepted, and then I'll try to get in. A couple years ago, a couple times I got into the regional. It all depends on what they're looking for, and I've learned that also. You have to be in the right place at the right time.
And you'll have to get a website for your work.
Yes,
so.
everyone tells me that. That's where it's like, no, I got to sit down and actually do it.
So now, so you don't have a big show coming up?
No, not right away, but I'm starting now to start feeling what I want my next group of work to be. I'm inspired to want to do another one of these big ones, and those would take a whole summer.
Really?
But, because I have to lay it out, I have to think about it, I have to process it.
And that is silk screen, right?
No, this is all paint.
Oh, okay. I thought but you use that silk screen.
Well, I think like a silkscreen artist, because I never realized I painted different than other people till I was asked to teach a class for Albany of some of the other art with some of the other art teachers.
Oh, okay.
We just did it as like a workshop, and all the other teachers were true artists in that they went into school with I paint. I didn't come into school. I came in with I draw.
So why don't we'll finish up here with, I know we talked about this a little peripherally, but the bottom line, I guess you could say, what really inspires you to produce a lot of this?
Passion.
Yeah.
I don't know that if I never showed again, I would stop. I'd still be doing it. This is something I need to do and I want to do. I love the idea that I can share it. I love the idea that people might like to buy it. But I think regardless, I would still create.
So you whether you had shows or not, because I asked you if I was kidding
Right.
around, what do you have, like a whole barn full of stuff? And you said, basically, I do have a whole barn full.
Well, I do. I have, and the thing is, to me, it's like, it's a need. I need to do this because it's part of who I am.
Now, have you had any of, and of course, you taught for so long, 30-something years, did you have any students that you went on to art careers, or?
Well, I've had a lot of students that have come back and been very kind and said they've learned a lot. I'm not sure that they've gone in necessarily into the art field, but I saw my role in the elementary more to show my students how they could find who they were and take the steps to become that person. And you didn't have to be an artist to be successful. You need to be successful in something that you enjoy doing it and hopefully make a career of it.
And you had everyone, all the kids were?
I did. I had a lot of kids. I mean, I think if I could do anything differently, it would be, I wish I had more time with each of my kids.
And what was a typical class, 20, 30? Or?
Well, the average was 25, but it varied because you might have a class that was larger because they put all the classes together. So you might have a 21, but another class might be 26 or 27. It still averages 25.
And you said you liked the energy and the chaos. And after 30-something, they didn't tire you out? I mean,
well, that was part of it. I felt like I always told the kids I didn't want to be the crazy lady on the table before I left.
Okay.
And when I started to feel physically I wasn't able to keep up with it, I decided that it was a good time to say I'm going to retire. And I made a point to tell my kids a year in advance because I didn't want them to think it had nothing to do with my kids. It had to do with where I was in my own life.
Okay. Well, Marion, thank you. I guess if you have a show anywhere, it'll be in the Times Union, or it'll be, so it's Marion Leap. It'll be on the screen here. You can look for her. And when you get that website up, you can have all your artwork.
I'll work on it.
All right, well, thanks for coming. We do appreciate it. And we will see you next time on Artist Corner.
Thank you very much.